way that London has responded, the resiliency really of not only the citizens in London, but the leadership there as well. We heard our reporter earlier, Lisa Kafanoff, read a response of the London mayor to Donald Trump's really rather unprecedented attack on him, attack on an ally. And now there's this additionally from CityCom this morning on his Twitter feed. He said, "We're all shocked and angry today, but this is our city. We will never let these cowards win. We will never be cowed by terrorism." Is that the way to respond the most effectively to entities like ISIS?
Well, I think the most important issue is a philosophical one. Yes, the idea that you can come at this with bombs is something that fails dramatically. We're seeing that in northern Iraq and Syria. But what's pushing them out and what creates traction for ISIS, what created traction for Al-Qaeda, was that overreaction from the West. We saw exactly what the United States did in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, and the rest of the West as well. And the problem is it actually created more terrorists than it killed. We can make a lot of bombs. We can make a lot of bullets. We can kill a lot of people, but the problem is we will create more enemies than we actually take down, and we always need to remember that. Always.
And Rosa Brooks, I want to let you respond to let you sort of evaluate the Theresa May, the Prime Minister, who's running for re-election next week. Actually, this was Theresa May this morning.
We believe we are experiencing a new trend in the threat we face, as terrorism breeds terrorism. And perpetrators are inspired to attack, not only on the basis of carefully constructed plots after years of planning and training, and not even as lone attackers radicalized online, but by copying one another and often using the crudest of means of attack.
And Rosa Brooks, what is the proper response to that? Because indeed, you have a cosmopolitan city like London, where you do have lots of freedom of movement. There's not sort of an obvious way to stop something like this happening.
No, there's not, and I think in some ways we have to think about it as like school shootings in the United States. When you have available ideologies out there, extremist ideologies, they're going to be appealing to people who are mentally ill, to people extremely angry. You can't keep everybody away from every weapon. You can't ban people from driving cars or vans. You can't keep guns out of people's hands. These things will happen, much as they will appall us each time. And I think that essentially the way to manage them, there's no silver bullet. We have to be doing good detective work. We have to be getting communities to collaborate to raise the alarm when somebody is acting weird, and acting in a way that seems like they might be planning some kind of attack. We have to not overreact. I think that that's a very fundamental point, that is indeed what terrorists want. That's why we call them terrorists. They're trying to sow terror. And the more we reward them by going, "Oh my God, you've struck a terrible blow at our society," the more we make other people think, "Hey, this is a good idea for me to commit a copycat attack." You get famous, people panic. Whereas the more we say, "This is awful, you're mentally ill, you're a criminal, but we're going to carry on," I think the more we reduce the temptation for people to do exactly this.
And it's really smart, Dean, because that's what Michael Bloomberg used to do in New York. I mean, New York being a city very much like London, very cosmopolitan, lots of freedom of movement, a draw for people who want to commit insane acts. But you also had in Portland really almost a mirror image of this kind of attack. Somebody with a knife radicalized, in this case, against Muslims as opposed to radicalized in the other direction. And you can't really stop that either. So I'm interested in wondering if you are in the way that our president responded to this, Donald Trump. He went on a tweet storm about the attacks in London. We'll just put up a couple of them. But do you notice we're not having a gun debate right now? That's because he used knives in a truck, knives being the same way that the Portland attacker attacked, saying we must stop being politically correct and get down to business of security for our people. If we don't get smart, it'll only get worse. And then saying we need to be smart, vigilant, and tough. We need the courts to give us back our rights. We need the travel ban as an extra level of safety. This strikes me as the opposite of what Rosa Brooks just recommended in terms of the way you respond.
It's ratcheting up the fear, giving these guys more credit than they deserve. But let me just say, as a Muslim American, because most Americans don't get to see us after these attacks talk about these things, I can share what I'm seeing on Facebook from Muslims, not just in America, from around the world. First of all, there's prayers. Our heart goes out to the victims. Second, to these terrorists, we just don't denounce them. We despise them. They do not represent my faith. They have nothing to do with Islam, except they invoke it. They are the enemies of Islam. They're not going to be in paradise. They're in hell burning forever. And the worst part of it is that they invoke Islam, they define it, they kill people in the name of our faith, and then we suffer a backlash like in Portland We've had 5 mosques burned down since January under suspicious circumstances. Women with hijabs are attacked because of these terrorists. They are not of our community. They're not of our faith. We are turning them in. Manchester, we know someone in that community turned them in. In Orlando, a fellow Muslim turned in a year ago that attack, turned them into the FBI. We are standing with all of us. And just to be clear, we want to see them killed and neutralized more than other people of other faiths want to see them killed and neutralized because they affect us as a result. So just so it's clear, from the Muslim point of view where this is, these are despicable people whose agenda is evil, not Islam. They are our enemies of Islam.
Yeah, well, we thank you for being here because that's exactly the reason that we wanted to have you here today, Dean, because it's important to hear from the Muslim community itself rather than just talking about it from the outside looking in. My guests will all be back. And in the United Kingdom, leaders reacted to the attacks with calm resolve.
The whole of our country needs to come together to take on this extremism. And we need to live our lives not in a series of separated, segregated communities, but as one truly united kingdom.
Elections are a wonderful thing, and that's one of the things that these terrorists hate. And one of the things that we can do is show that we aren't going to be cowards is by voting on Thursday and making sure that we understand the importance of our democracy, our civil liberties, and our human rights.
And when we come back, more on how the American president chose to react. That's next. For you, Susan Rice, who was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, responding to that very question of whether or not just banning all Muslims from entering the United States would do any good. Take a listen.
There's really no evidence to suggest that by banning Muslims or banning Muslims from a particular set of 6 countries that we would make ourselves here in the United States safer. And that's, I believe, one of the major reasons why the courts thus far have been very skeptical of the travel ban. Moreover, I think there's a very real risk that by stigmatizing and isolating Muslims from particular countries and Muslims in general, that we alienate the very communities here in the United States whose cooperation we most need to detect and prevent these homegrown extremists from being able to carry out attacks.
Nayyera, your thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting that she mentions data and evidence because that's something that's clearly lacking in this administration in their responses to not just terror, but any other domestic attacks. Because as we know, the data and evidence also shows, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center and multiple other sources, the data shows the uptick in domestic terror is from white supremacists. And this is something Dean has talked about and written about extensively. That is the looming challenge for people living in the United States, is attacks from armed white men. And that is not something that the president has directly chosen to address. Instead, he has harped on the attacks on by ISIS terrorists overseas at the expense of standing with our allies. There was nothing to say that he offered condolences to the victims directly, which is generally the first line of response that you have on day one of a terrorist attack. And you also then offer resources and support to the people in the area. Instead, he chose to attack the mayor of London in one of his tweets, saying that, taking one of his quotes not only out of context, but also calling him essentially an idiot when this guy is reeling along with the city and needs our support. And it's interesting to see he attacked him, but not Theresa May, the prime minister. Attacking Sadiq Khan is the mayor. He is the first Muslim mayor of a major city in the West, and that is very interesting to note that that is the line of direction that President Trump took.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's completely a coincidence that he only attacked the first Muslim mayor and not Theresa May. Completely a coincidence. Lays out Curry, just to take those 2 points, because I do feel like there are, and you...
When we look at the ISIS leaders, when they're trying to recruit and radicalize, they'll say the West hates us. They'll say they want to destroy our way of life. Well, Donald Trump's saying Islam hates us and saying Muslims want to destroy our way of life. Donald Trump is radicalizing good Americans the same way ISIS might be radicalizing good Muslims to commit acts of violence. And so about time we all wake up to it. Donald Trump, stop this.
Yeah, and Malcolm, to that point, on a counterterrorism level, if the Muslim community feels increasingly demonized in a place like London or in the United States, doesn't that actually increase the possibility of radicalism, or radicalization?
Yeah, sure, it increases the possibility of radicalization. It also creates terrorists. This strategy came directly from the mind of Osama bin Laden himself. He carried out the 9/11 attacks in an effort to get the United States to attack the Muslim world, to bring in military forces, and to change the mindset of the Muslim world to show that there is a clash of civilizations between what he believed his cult version of Islam was going to lead the Muslim world and the West. Now we have an administration that also believes in bin Laden's clash of civilizations and believes the Muslim world is at fault, not this 1/1,000,000% of radical cultists. So, I mean, as long as we keep this up, terrorists are just going to be regenerated by the tens of thousands.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lake Al-Khoury and Michael Steele. Dean, Malcolm, and Nayyera will be back later in the show. And up next, Chris Dickey joins us live to talk about Thursday's